that we've noticed during the discussions, not just to repeat what has been said, but to try to start and identify possible conclusions that will come out of this event. Once we put everything together, probably we'll review a little bit the recording and make sure of be able to do something useful for New Mexico, for the public authorities, for business. So Manuel, what do you think? What do you see today? Huh?
Well, today was very insightful. I not only have a lot of respect and admiration for everybody that was on the panels.
Yeah.
They're doing true work. I mean, it's hard not only to do the work that they do, but also to conceptualize and envision. You know, there was a lot of calls within the entire session. One of the common threads was vision, and these are people who are bursting with vision. They have vision. It's now about creating some sort of common discourse wherein that vision now aligns with the realities of all the people that encompass what we call New Mexico. And I think that that's one of the great challenges. I mean, we heard over and over again, and even in the chat and the contributors, they were like, we need more voices, we need more people to contribute, and we need people to be included. And that's part of New Mexico's process. And that's actually why I think I used to make fun of our state motto, it grows as it goes. But actually it's not a passive statement. I think it is actually an attentive statement to the fact that you have to wait for, you can't allow progress to operate without a past. Mm-hmm. And the two of them have to be in conversation with each other. And that tension is a very real thing for all places. But for me, that resonated quite clearly because these are people who love New Mexico. They love what it is and what it stood for, but they also know we need to be able to develop this type of vision. And there's almost kind of a tinge of a frustration in that I think is what we capture. I was writing down some notes inside of the overall structure of just trying to figure out how I would narrate this final moment. And one of the things that came to me is, we were forged in adversity, we are skilled in diversity, but we're to train ourselves for opportunity. And I think that inside of that, there is also a call to CNM and UNM. I think this is one of the larger takeaways for us as institutions, is that, well, one of the things I'm proud of is the fact that we collaborated on this sort of thing. And that we built this relationship because we have not seen arbitrary lines set between vocational training and university skill set building. And those things are in conversation.
Let me say something on that, Manuel. I think this has been, from that point of view, an example of what can be in New Mexico, because there is no point denying that sometimes not everyone in UNM or CNM see the two institutions as a system, right? There is often there is also some sense of rivalry or competition for students and other things, and which is the thing that we see also in the state. I think one could feel that there was a divide, for instance, as we went on in the sessions, between the perception that we have of the state in the northern part of the state and in the southern part of the state. And I lived in both areas. I used to live in Cloudcroft and Alamogordo, and now I live in Rio Rancho. So I felt that a lot in the year. So I hope that this can be an example in that direction, in our small reality, to help that.
Yeah, I totally agree, Lucio. And you know, it's one of those things where we, you know, another thread that I saw was relationships and infrastructure. I mentioned it a couple of times in the sessions, but it is a common thread. We were talking about from business to consumer to this ecosystem. You know, it's a lot about these personal feelings, these sentiments. Mental health is included in that, and that translates into public health, and those things do translate into economic well-being as well. And I think one of the big takeaways for me, I try to ask myself, what's my role as a professor? And when I work and I serve this institution, and you, Lucio, you and I have worked together for a very long time. You know, we have always valued this intersection between broad thinking, diversity of disciplines, but also this idea of practicality and pragmatism. And I think that has been long the struggle in New Mexico, and for higher education, for people who are going through COVID, They were experiencing, why am I going to school? Or some people were going to school because they said, now is my time. But there were all of these different, like very pointed, focused reasons and motivations for engaging in higher education. And in and of itself, we need people who are studying identity. We need people who are studying history, just as much as we need people who are studying economics and who are studying science and engineering, because we are at the intersection of relationships and infrastructure. And those things don't operate by themselves. We've seen that play out in the world so many times.
As an example that we have as people doing that, I mean, now he's moving to Belgium, but Patrick Schaffer, there was in one of the sessions that you moderated, right? When he was when he was leading the Hunt Institute at UTEP, he was looking at economic current issues, but he was always drawing his analysis from history, from a historical philosophical approach, going in the end on very concrete applications, so not just as a theoretical element. Something that I wanted to tie to that, identity is also important to determine the choice that will be made, because in all sessions, there was this idea of a diversification. Now, whether, the diversification of our economy should be focused more on aerospace or on the border industry, or maybe on online working, attracting remote workers from other states, or in using our workers to working remote for companies in other states. But there was a great variety of ideas, and of course, what works best depends also from this idea of what we are as a state. And I would say it ties into the other concept that I've seen as very much emphasized in different forums, the need of coordination, right? We're talking about a unified strategic planning, or when we're talking about state planning, there was a highlighting of fragmentation. So there were different terms of view used, but it seems to me that those two things, those issues came all together. What we are, so a sense of identity. Based on that, how we want to see New Mexico develop toward more resiliency, and how do we diversify a plan toward that. So I see all these elements in that time together, all being a piece of a puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's right. What ties to that in my view, in my survey of what was being said, I wrote it down, over 14 times, people said in some way, shape, or form that New Mexico isn't an island to itself, but it does have its own institutional power to shape its own destiny. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I found really, really powerful and important, because what that is, and that's a message to people who are watching this or people who are talking about it later on, we need, in order to be able to build those kinds of skill building environments in this ecosystem, we need people who have leadership that are willing and able to tell the story of New Mexico's economy, and not just to ourselves, but to tell it to the rest of the world. And I really do believe that resonated with me so much, because it is one of those things where we always seem, and this was the frustration part, we always seem to be right on the cusp of doing the big thing, and then it halts. But there's a reason why there's that halt. And it's not just because we're inert, and it's not because we can't get our stuff together. It's because we are actually following the exact same logic that many people throughout the world economy experience. And that's the other thing, is that when we look at ourselves as a state in the United States, we always put ourselves in that kind of low ranking, and we're always competing inside of those metrics, and that's our worldview. But if we see ourselves as an institution that relates to every other person that's sharing this logic in the world, we become the wealthiest state in the United States by far. It's not even close. The scale of growth in the world economy comes from people who look, act, and think like New Mexicans are experiencing. And that seems to be tacitly what people are talking about in these discussions.
It's true. I agree with that. Something also that when we were talking about these, I was coming back to my mind, is one of the first issues that I wrote down, though, is also what Terry was saying about the importance to move, right? We don't want to see this train passing by us. And I've seen this issue of the opportunity also in other places. In my native Italy, they're now seeing that they have a unique opportunity. Italy is a beautiful country with a lot of issues, some areas of no-fault development, and the European Union is giving huge funds for the recovery fund from COVID-19. So Italy is trying to renew its economy and overcome some of its structural issues using this money. And in a way, I had the impression to see something similar in the message that Terry was giving. I say, okay, great, let's understand what we are, what we want, etc. But that money is there now, we don't want to lose it. And it's important, so let's figure out rapidly what is important to be done, but let's do it. If we have infrastructure to build, there would be trillions overall in the country. That means at least hundreds of millions potentially available to New Mexico. Let's get on that before the train passes, so that then we can either have more logistic infrastructure, as Randy was saying, or more broadband infrastructure for the remote workers, or invest more at the border, as probably Jerry Pacheco would like, and so on. But so this sense at the same time of understanding all elements, but of urgency. We need to do it soon if we want really COVID-19 to have been also from the point of view of will be.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that message, and it was said also in the city and county level. Mei-Ling was mentioning it, Cynthia mentioned it, but there are so many opportunities right now that are coming. They're manifesting right now, and the time to take advantage of that is now, because there is a changed political discourse about how we invest in each other's lives. At the state level, we see that with new financially inclusive instruments that are being proposed. We see it at the federal level when we're talking about infrastructural development, which should and will include digital broadband infrastructure. But those things are possible. It's now a question in the hands of everyday citizens and the people who consume products at businesses every day to have the political will to be able to say, this is our moment, and regardless of what your political ideology is and how that's been segregated for so very long in this, we can agree that we can invest in the future in this particular ways, and we would yield benefits from that. There is a return on investment for all of those elements.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, the concept of political divisions. One is to hope that this is not a political matter. It's not a matter of Democrat or Republican. It's not a matter of who can take advantage toward midterm elections or next governor election and so on. So it's very important. Our effort in this event was to avoid any political comment, right? I see there were now and then comments in the chat with someone saying there is a special election, this candidate is good, right? Of course, people have their passions, and that's understandable. But although each of us their political ideas, it can be more on the right or more on the left. There was a very conscious effort to avoid getting into that, because we are all New Mexicans. And it's in everyone's interest, young, old, Republican, Democrats, Libertarian, it's in everyone's interest not to lose these opportunities and to be able to rebuild our economy in a better way.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me in regards to what you're saying, Lucio, is the level of passion and effort that people have done to evaluate where we are and where we are at this moment. I mean, you saw so many of the panelists who have really done a lot of introspection, not just for their own organization, but for others within their ecosystem, to try to draw that out. I did want to take a moment to acknowledge, because even in the process of planning this event, we got other people that said, I know that there's a lot of speakers already on the panels, but can I share this, share that? And many people even on the chats were sharing a lot of resources for us to pay attention to. John Garcia has a wealth of resources through SBA, Randy through the New Mexico Trade Alliance, but a lot of the stuff Somos Unidos was doing, all of them, every single one of the panelists has a depth of resources that they're adding. I did want to share screen just for a moment, because I do want to acknowledge one, because there was kind of there was always a real passion in sharing a lot of the work that's done. There's a lot of hard fought efforts right now to develop that. So I do want to acknowledge the Albuquerque Economic Development Organization, AAD. They're coming up, and this is just a public resource that I wanted to give a shout out to. They're publishing a big report, and the completion of that report is going to be in June 2021, but they're doing this comprehensive economic development recovery strategy for the greater region. And this is an example of some of those collective resources coming to bear on this larger discussion. So people are asking, that was a great conversation. We had great dialogue. What's next? Well, the people who were on this panel, and even people who weren't, like Danielle Casey, who is the CEO of AED, they're producing a lot of different frames of reference for us. And now we're going to have to do the hard work of learning how to synthesize this information in a way that then uses and creates a rationale for people to take risks, but do it intelligently, do it smartly, and do it confidently, knowing that we have the kind of support that we do have out there. Any of the number of people that we had on the panel are vanguards of that kind of work. Just to note, Linda did post on the chat that a link that we posted up on the web to document all of the different resources that we had in relation to this forum. So I want to make sure that everybody just notes that and copies it. It is available online, and it has the expert sheet from the Anderson and CNM specialists that were wanting to chime in. But again, that's something that when people are asking, people show up. This is almost a profoundly field of dreams moment where we ask New Mexico, will you show up? And people have and will show up for this state. And I think that's reflected also in the response mechanisms that we had. I'll share the screen just for a moment, just to show you the polling, the aggregate polling of the day's events. And there you go. Do you feel confident and do you agree in how we're gonna bounce back, how we're building towards resilience at all the different levels, at the state level, city, national, and international? And there's strong opinions that there is that. One of the observations I make in relation to that is that the next step and the next work also is about inclusivity. So we're all here participating in a day-long event on a Friday, and God bless you for that, and thank you. But there's lots of people out there who aren't. And there's lots of people who may still feel very disenfranchised by what's happened through COVID and through our current politics. So the work now is, if this energy is so overwhelming in this group and those people who attended, then the question becomes how we then kind of move that into that leadership that people were calling for, to actually convince others who have felt disenfranchised that this is a logical approach and these are the skills and tools we need to build ourselves out.
I completely agree. I think it's important that this doesn't become just an interesting Friday event, right? But it's something seminal that allows to include more subjects, more parts of the population, and be of service to businesses and authorities. As we were commenting this morning, UNM and CNM are a system that is at the service of the state and of the state population. And it's important also for us to learn through these events how to serve better. Like, there were a few ideas that came up today about further, for instance, training, professional training that CNM could do to help in specific sector. I really appreciated that. Something else that we didn't have the chance to get in some other important industry, right? We talked by reference about oil and gas. We didn't talk at all about audiovisual. Unfortunately, we didn't have the possibility to arrange for Netflix to participate, but we have to consider the Netflix as its biggest production center in North America, here in Albuquerque. So that audiovisual film industry that has always been very important for the state is keeping growing. And so it would be another fundamental element of diversification in our economy. There is a whole area that has been mentioned today of recreational marijuana. What does, with that now being legalized, what will that mean in terms of problems, in terms of opportunities? So it's that's something else that we'll see in the future. So there is so much more that could also be addressed and probably might be addressed if if in the future we do other similar events to keep serving the community and the state.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to Holly's point in the chat, these are things that are going to have to be done performatively and also in linguistically in other spaces as well. We're going to have to have these conversations in Spanish, and we should call upon all Spanish speaking leaders who do this to participate in making those gestures as well, and to partner and to do that sort of stuff. I think we should be having those sorts of discussions, and not just in terms of linguistic, performatively, right? This is the challenge right now. We now have a broad and expanding vocabulary about inclusion, and who gets included and who is recycling the information over and over and over again. And once we do that network, I think we need to think about issues of gender. We need to think about issues of ableism. Those are words that we're now getting that are gaining traction and gaining ground. And we need to be able to reach out in communities and to be in those communities in an authentic and meaningful way. So I think that's a really, really powerful comment. That's New Mexico. That's why it grows as it goes, because the invisible labor of diversity is the one that doesn't get accounted for. And that's why you see 50. And that's why you call it the 50th state. But if we turn that into an opportunity, exactly to your media point, and all sorts of other kind of common opportunities, we become the first emerging economy.
Absolutely. And Holly also is an interesting comment, right? And I was actually going to add that while Manuel was talking, of course, we also have fundamental Native American community or communities in our state that also need to be included, and whose specific social view and cultural view needs to be taken into account when we talk about the future of the state.
And for the first time in a long time, and this is largely represented even in the symbolically with Deb Haaland, becoming a cabinet secretary. But if you look around, I mean, there's some super heavy hitters in our community that are tremendous assets to the community, from the Native American communities that we've lived in and engaged with all our lives, right? I have a lot of respect for. I'm going to give a shout out to Lee Francis. He's one of my dear friends, and I think he's a really, really interesting trendsetter in terms of how we think about through his organization Native Realities. Warren Montoya with Resilience, Vanessa Roanhorse, and her network is massive, and I got a lot of love for how she's developing new leadership and new vision for what New Mexico is and how we operate. And that's something that I think operates at this very robust level. We are not only just a diverse state in platitudes, we are a meaningfully diverse one, with all of the difficulties that comes with, and we are an international state in that context as well. We have sovereign entities and rulemaking bodies within the state that also make that rich. We used to say that it made it complicated, but that's the other message that I think we got today, is that adversity is not, it's invisible labor. It's an opportunity. It's a value added.
Correct.
So I don't want it to be two dudes talking about what was already said. I think I told you that, Lucio. I think we've had a long day. Everybody has been very attentive and very, very, very wonderful. We're deeply honored to have the attendees that we've had. I just want to take another moment to thank Aline Gonzalez, Felicia Cortez. Linda Schul has been our partner and an awesome friend and ally to this, who's through its inception has been really a leader and really kind of the maker, the change maker in this process of happening. And you, Lucio, as a friend and partner who has made this, through its inception, also made this possible. I also want to acknowledge Josh Size.
And also acknowledge yourself too.
Salut. I'm proud to be here. Super proud to be here. Josh Size, Anna Dykman and her marketing team, Megan Borders and the event planners at Anderson, and they've done a wonderful job coordinating with CNM. And once again, this becomes one of those things where we shared and we coordinated, and that's been a really great model, and I'm really proud of how that.
Well, and I would also reiterate, as we said this morning, that thanks to the respective deans that appreciated and supported this initiative. If we could dedicate a lot of time working together, was also because we had a support from the leadership in our respective schools.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Sean Berman from Anderson also mentions those people who didn't get their mug on Zoom, and he's totally right. Please read those expert sheets, those quotes. They were very thoughtful and very, very productive. And you start to take away. This is I hope going to be a day that we take away and memorialize in many productive ways. So thank you all for your time, and thank you for your energy. And I think as they say, it'll grow as it goes. So salud. Así es todo México.
Bye, everyone.